you. So thank you all for joining us tonight to our first artist talk of the semester. Today we have Dr. Bethany Engstrom with us. She's exploring the perception of experience and space through objects, installation, audio, and video. Bethany lives and works in Belfast, Maine. She received a BA in art history. Then she did a MFA in Intermedia, and maybe 4 or 5 years ago, she finalized her interdisciplinary PhD in Intermedial Collaborative Practices from the University of Maine. She recently was an artist in residency at Vermont Studio Center, as well as Hugh Noakes Artist Colony, and has also participated in residencies at the Elise Bourgeois Foundation and Mildred's Lane. Her work has been included in a number of exhibitions in conjunction with UMaine, as well as recent exhibitions at Asymmetric Arts and the Center for Maine Contemporary Art in Rockland. Along with her creative work, she's an associated curator at the Center for Maine Contemporary Art, a lecturer at the University of Maine, Augusta. Bethany is also the co-founder of the collaborative group, the Core 5 Incident. Bethany, I leave the space, it's all yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Siglinde. It's so exciting to be here today. I just want to really thank you for joining me, and thank you for the invitation. As Siglinde mentioned, I'm associate curator, and it's wonderful to be able to speak about my creative work. I love talking about everyone else's, but it's always a nice reminder to speak about my own work. So I'm going to just start right away with, I'll share my screen here. So Bethany Engstrom, I always find I have a visual name, so it's easier to see it sometimes, my website here. And as was mentioned, my background is in art history. My undergrad was in art history, and I really thought that was kind of the direction I would go into, actually. And then I started working at a museum. I started traveling, really seeing what work was being done. And so I switched gears a little and concentrated on my own creative work and pursued the MFA. So just a little bit about that, because art history does play into so much of my work. My interests, in undergrad was the Italian Baroque, in particular sculpture. During that time, I really found that time was where interactive work started. Bernini's sculpture here, David, is a great example of that, I think, in that you have to be physically present in the space with a sculpture. You have to move around it. As you can see from these three views, you can't just be passive. You can't view this in one single view. You have to walk around it. And as you walk around it, the scene unfolds. So that really struck me, and that's really been a part of my practice throughout. And I forgot to mention, of course, if you have any questions, please let me know. If I go too quickly, sometimes I get excited and speak really fast. So just let me know if there are any questions as we go. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer at the end as well. So yeah, and we'll see where this kind of comes back around in some of my recent work as well. So one of the first spaces I created that really kind of thinks about this idea of being that's inherent in all of my work. I'm really interested in how we are in the world, how the states of being in our everyday life really impact what we do, how we experience space. And this was one of the first I created. It was, and because of that, it was one of the first. My documentation isn't great, so these are really the best images I have. So this is titled 44 Seconds, and in it you walk into this constructed completely white space. As you can see from with the figure in the yellow, you go in, it's white light, it's white noise, there's a white noise machine, completely painted white. And this was in response to the actual space that it was exhibited in, which was a old department store that had been stripped of everything. So you could see were the bare bones, the studs holding up the walls, the insulation. And so in this space, I put in this pristine white space. And over on the left side, you can see a monitor here. So in the center of the space, there was a camera that looked down. So if you walked over to the left, you could see, and that's me in the monitor there. And of course, throughout the MFA and my creative work, there's always been an importance of philosophy, and my research has really revolved around ideas of that, and psychology too, and how we really respond to different spaces. So I'll have some of these quotes. I won't read them, but these are really kind of influential to my work. And how I process the information, how the work begins to come together. Much of my work is in response to some of the readings that I do, plus experiences as well. And I will show you a few older works, but I'm going to really focus on the most recent work I've done in the last 2 years. So a lot of my thesis research was about the uncanny, and how, in particular, natural elements being out in nature can really impact these feelings of being at home but not, the contradiction and duality of those experiences. So here we have the Heimlich mist called hill fog, in which I constructed this, I think it was 10 foot by 10 foot. I didn't put the dimensions there, but space that you walk into. And as you go in and around this central panel, which is in the middle of the detail, you really start to get immersed in the space. It gets almost disorienting. And it really looks at how we experience, again, nature, and in this particular case, fog. From Maine. I've lived here my whole life, and the weather is very interesting and changes a lot. And we get these very dense fogs. And I live on the coast, so we get them here on the coast in the water, and then also on the mountains as well. I've experienced, and I do have some slides here. So as you walk into the space, you hear this sound surrounding yourself. And oftentimes I'll incorporate elements of audio to enhance the experience, and really develop and really, again, kind of that idea of the uncanny and the uncertainty and the unknowns and how they present themselves. And during this time, I also began working collaboratively. My PhD was a collaborative PhD in which I actually worked with 2 other people. And we created, it was interdisciplinary. It was kind of a build your own, in a way, PhD. So we really experimented with practice and research, in which we collaborated and produced these, what we called culinary incidents, but similar to what you think of as dinner theater. So they really encompassed all of these elements of the senses, and we each kind of led different sections. My focus was on the installation and the environment, and how that incorporated with the storytelling, the food, and as you can see in this, the images on the right, really the kind of the technological aspects. In this particular one, there was an actress, and she was telling stories of her life, and so the images on the screen would alter and reflect the stories being told. And much of my practice in, in the collaborative projects, but also in my installations have been really based on the idea of how people interact in spaces together as well. So in most recent work, I've been gravitating more towards idea of the natural environment and being from Maine, but also with concerns about climate crisis and how the environment is changing constantly, and how we as people, humans, really need to really think about that, what we can do, what kind of awareness we can bring to the table. And being from Maine, I'm from the woods, more in the middle of the state. And I often go camping. I go on the Penobscot River, which was where Henry David Thoreau went and wrote there's even a campsite named after him, which is part of where he had gone, which is fun. So that really resonated too, being there where he had been, and our experiences within nature. And oftentimes, here's some examples of northern Maine, early in the 19th century here, just some examples. And of course, when you're usually out camping, you're in these temporary structures, tents. And so I really started to look at the duality and the of tents being interior, but also in the exterior, you're protected, but not as you are in a house or concrete or brick building. You're still exposed, and then how so that also relates to the ideas of how we inhabit certain places that we might not necessarily should, or we're forced to go to. So here I sewed together a muslin fabric that I coated with paraffin wax and made a frame out of conduit. So the materials I use, as you can see, vary and really depend on what I'm trying to express, how they might enhance the space. And so there are actually spruce boughs from trees in the bottom of the tent too. It's kind of like a big pillowcase with the boughs, so you can actually get the smell as you walk in. And this has been it's been shown inside and outside here. And I've sewn before, but this was really kind of my first experience sewing a shape, which was fun. Really experimenting with the textiles and the sewing to create this shape. And again, so I should note too that the audio is from the river that I camp next to, and I couldn't quite understand. I would get very anxious, and a lot of my ideas of being in the world are kind of these states of anxiety, but not necessarily bad, good or bad, just states of anxiety that really kind of made you think. And where we had camped, we were at the end of an island, so it was where the river was conjoining. And so on one side it was really fast flowing water, and the other side it was nice, kind of a trickle. And I couldn't understand why I was getting so agitated being out, by this river in the woods, very peaceful. But it was the water, where it meets together, that was really kind of bothering me. But once I figured that out, it was okay. I could understand what was happening. And so that's why I really kind of found it important to include that element of the water in this. That carried on to this series that I did while in residence at the Ellis Beauregard Foundation, which is right in Rockland, Maine. And at that time, it's evolved a little bit, but at that time I had use of this really incredible studio, which was a former classroom. So you can see the blackboards in the back there that I was able to use to really kind of work out these ideas. Again, dealing with the tent, interior, exterior, temporality, and how we interact in spaces such as those. So on the left, we have two tents that it's mounted on plexi and then uplit from the pedestal. And we have the, actually, let me go here. Here's a little bit of a detail. So we have the interior of the tent and the exterior of the tent with each side of plexi representing each side of the tent here. And then at the other component on the right was this large theater space that was part of the building I was in. So when I first arrived in this space, I was just really struck by this incredible theater. And it was really, the school has not been renovated. It was like it was in, I think, in the 1980s when it was vacated. So it's in, various states of disrepair. So the larger plexi piece really captures the essence of the theater space there, and the what had happened, all this idea of timelessness within the space. So now I'm going to shift to the more recent work. This is kind of the direction I am going in now. I'm really looking forward to, working on this as it progresses. And of course, the current world situation with COVID is really going to expand, I think, how this is. And I should say, these projects continue. Some of my projects go over the years and keep continuing. So they're not, they're not just one piece and then I'm done. They are really a continuation. So I'm always looking towards the future and how that will really kind of evolve. As Siglani mentioned, the residencies in Ellis Beauregard, I found being a mother and working full time, these are the times that I really get to focus on my work. They're really important. I'm going to actually play this and I'll speak over it. I hope it's not too loud. I don't.
Can I make a comment, Bethany? Yep. The audio is really loud, so we cannot hear you. So okay. Maybe we play the video and then you can talk. Is that okay?
I'll just play a little bit. I think it's pretty long, so I won't play all of it.
Yeah.
So just to give you an idea, so I went to the residency at Hewnoaks, which is in the western part of Maine, and it's right on a lake. It's in the middle of this really incredible spot that has cabins. So you get your own cabin, you get access to the lake. And I went with my GoPros and with expectations of doing these really luscious scenes of natural landscapes. And of course, I did some of that here, as you can see, just experimenting with the placement of the cameras underwater in the grass, really thinking about time. I was reading Arden Reed's Slow Art, about slowing down and processing work, and Robert Irwin's book, which I always forget the name of, and it's right here, Seeing is Forgetting, the name of the thing one sees. So really kind of thinking about how we process time and boredom too, which has been, you know, something that has been some on my mind, especially here. I was really looking forward to just slowing down. There was no, you know, of course, no TV, no internet, which was really great. And so I really wanted to, you know, capture these images to really focus on the environment there. And I did that, which was great. But on the way to the residency, which was about a 2.5 hour drive, I really was thinking about motherhood, and and being away from my daughter. And I had been away from her, you know, numerous times, going to New York and other places for work. But for some reason, this really resonated with me. And I really noticed the separation. And I was thinking about, well, how do I, work through that? How do I think, how does this come out in the work? And again, the idea of time. And I had also just installed work for other artists. So I was thinking about how art is work, motherhood is work, and it's often physical work. And that how it comes out, and the natural elements of that. Realizing, it's not being a mother is very common. It's nothing unusual to me at all. But again, how this, in my experience of that. And so I started doing another video piece in which I went down to the lake. I had a bucket. It would just happen to be there by the fire pit at Hewen Oaks, and the artists in residence there that oversaw just said, "Oh yeah, use it." And because I was thinking about the weight of everything, and the weight of my daughter, which 1 gallon of water is 8 pounds. So 4 gallons of water is about 32 pounds, the weight of my daughter. So I did this, started with a video. I'm going to see if it plays. Oops, oh, I didn't check this one, and I'll see it's now. So it's not working for some reason. I'm sorry, it's let me make sure that I shared with, yep, video clips, yes. Okay. If you don't mind if I take a second just to get that video off of Vimeo, if that's okay. Sorry about this. No problem. I think we're kind of used to technical difficulties now in a way. So let's see. Okay. So in an effort to save time, this is a little over 11 minutes. I'll just speed ahead just so you get a couple. Oh, that was during my, yeah. So what's happening here is I filled the bucket with about 4 gallons of water, so about 32 pounds again. I'm not sure what that translates, sorry. But, and then I carried it up the very steep, it was embankment, back to the cabin. So the way down to the lake was this incredibly steep hill that was probably 500 feet. I'm not sure how, a kilometer, not quite a kilometer, long. So in between I'm resting, you know, because the handle would dig right into my hand. And then I would progress until I got right back to my cabin. And so how this actually is visualized is through an installation here. And I don't have great images. I did this during another residency at Vermont Studio Center. So it's just a studio shot here in which the videos will play as you peek down. So that was the one we just saw. And while I was at Hewn Oaks, I also did these studies, and I do consider these studies, again, for future work or incorporation into installations. And so this particular one is, I'm holding the bucket full of water until I just can't anymore, which is just over, you know, almost 4.5 minutes, or over 4.5 minutes, which doesn't seem like a long time, but when you're holding a bucket of water, it really is. And again, these are not easy to watch. I understand, like, again, this idea of boredom plays into it in time. There, you know, I feel like, you know, I have a hard time sitting and watching the whole thing, honestly. So when I went, so this was in September of 2019. I then went to Vermont Studio Center in November of that year, and continued this idea and did more of these studies. Sorry for doing the web page thing. Again, where I'm holding the buckets for as long as possible. This time I mounted the camera from above because I forgot my GoPros. This time I was just installing a show where at CMCA where I work. And so I was on the next day I left and went to Vermont. So I had my iPhone and captured these because I was intending to go do casting more, which I did. But so I hold them, and then in the middle, I'm moving the water continuously. And so they, once the water settles, each of the channels goes out. And so that again gets shown in the bucket as well. And let's go back to my PowerPoint here. And so I was working again on these ideas of being separated again, this time for 2 weeks before it was a week, and how to work through those ideas. But Vermont Studio Center is it's a more of a traditional residency, which I didn't quite realize at the, I knew in some ways, but nobody really no one else was doing video, and I had gone with ideas of casting because I was in the sculpture studio, which was great. So there were so many facilities available for me to use, and so I started casting. I casted a bucket, which was pretty challenging, actually, the scale of it. And then something that really struck me was the kind of lack of communication and lack of community except during meal times. In your studio, you're working away all by yourself. There's not a lot of back and forth, which I was not used to, actually. You couldn't have music playing. Everybody had their headphones on, and so it was really important for me to at mealtime. So something that was always there in the communal dining room was bread and apples. So each time I would go, I'd bring an apple back to the studio and cast it. The bread, I couldn't get bread from there, so I had to order this. But I am planning on casting some I make at some point. So I just started again casting. So you can see with the apples on the lower right there, these are the kind of the imperfections that come from the casting material. These are plaster, and I kept them because, and each time I cast, I could use the mold about 3 or 4 times before it really disintegrated. I was using this material that's natural, non-toxic, and reusable, so you can remelt it and do it again. But I liked the imperfections. I really thought that was part of the process, so I left them there rather than clean them up. And so I did a number of these. I casted some tools that I was using, just really experimenting. And then I got home and I put these casts away in the barn to store. And while and then I went back to work, and in the interim, they began to mold. So when I pulled them out, just as my job went remote, I went home. I was at home every day. And so I revisited these. I took them out. They were stored in a bucket, took them out, and they were just covered in mold. And at first I thought, oh no, they're ruined. But no, they're they're not. They're still transforming. They're still growing. They're still living. I had tried to preserve this kind of idea of community with the food, but as everything, it just continues to change. So I embraced that, and I actually really like the spots on them. And so these are still moving and still changing. And so these are more recent photos of them. And I mean, I guess I could put they're still, 2019 to 2021, because they are still changing. And of course, at that moment, with everything going on, I really started to think about sculpture, how, like in the beginning, how we interact with sculpture in our daily lives too, as well. And so just in the sake of time, I'll kind of move on to some of my other work. So that's my creative work. And again, thank you so much for being able to talk to it. But I also wanted to mention some of my other creative work. I find that it all evolves around and all connects. So my curatorial work is part of that creative process. So this is the Center for Maine Contemporary Contemporary Art, where I'm the associate curator here. Very contemporary space, glass, lots of glass, as you can see. But I've been working on some of these group shows that really do involve my own creative interests. So this one it was in 2017 to 18, Materiality, the Matter of Matter, which really looks at how artists use materials as agents in their in what they're discussing. They give the materials agency. And so I worked with a group of artists that created, some of the work was previously created, but some of it was created for the exhibition, which I always find really interesting. It's a very collaborative process in that way. And here, as we can see, and as you know, I found it really interesting to explore because I constantly work with different materials myself. A collaborative project here, Tectonic Industries, which is a collaborative duo, partners in work and life. And they created this installation. You walk into the gallery space and you answer questions based on your life and how your personality. And then you create, based on those answers, you create a model of whatever, your personality kind of dictates. It's really, it's using humor to really kind of look at everyday situations. So you can make a rocket or a car, a trailer. And so outside in the courtyard, they had their trailer, as you can see in the lower right here. And then one of the more recent exhibitions that I curated was Temporality, the Process of Time. And this was a show that I did right before going to Vermont. So as a curator, I work with the artists, but we're very small. So I also install the work too and help the artists with that. And this is all work based on ideas of time. So again, at this time I was reading about Robert Irwin, Boredom, Time, and for my own personal work, but also for my curatorial work here. So, and again, these exhibitions, I really like to include as many different types of work as possible. So we have a mural on the upper left, that the artist came in and did specifically for the space, with paintings adjacent, and then video work, sculpture, really photography. So that's a really quick kind of recap of my work. I just want to, really thank everyone, and I'm happy to answer any questions at all.
Bethany, thank you so much. I might start with a question. How do you think that the idea comes in both cases, in both processes? Does the theory comes first, or the process comes first, or both comes at the same time? Or how does this evolve? Because I've in your practice and also in the curatorial practice, I'm seeing these relations between your practice and also the curatorial, but also the question is how the ideas come, because to have this, to select artists and work with the artist, it also needs collaboration and another creative process that it's not the same as a creative process to make an artwork, right?
Right. Yes, that's a great idea. Great question. For my work, for all of it, really the idea tends to form first. So from the readings, that I do, the discussions I have, I really kind of think about experiences, especially as the experiences I have, will really resonate. And then I really think about how I can bring that out in a visual form. I say visual, and that is just an easier way to say it, but really kind of the experience. And that really, the idea will form and then dictate what happens, what materials are used, what will be the best material to use to express that idea. So like the tents really came from an idea of being at home outside. How are you at home outside? Well, you are under shelter, but it's temporary shelter, which is fabric, textile. And so this also is part of my curatorial creative process too. It's the idea tends to come first, and either I happen to know artists that are working with that, or or I seek out more people that might be working with that, or lots of, yes, it happens from conversations. It's very collaborative. There was an artist for the last temporality show that I knew. Her work was very durational based. And so it was through conversations and the development of her project that it came together for the show. And it didn't actually, it wasn't actually finished until it was in the space. So it really kind of worked through these different conversations. Of course, I'm just kind of guiding it. I'm not, saying how to make anything, but it's talking about, in that case, ideas of time and duration, and that really forming for her and how into the space.
Thank you, Bethany. Anybody has some comments or questions? You can
I have a question.
Yeah, Bijan.
So like, it's kind of a small question. Like, I wanted to know that, the day that you forgot the GoPros, and then you took your iPhone, you were saying, like, and you put it like on the roof. So if you had taken your GoPros, for example, would you have like, recorded it from many different angles, or, and like as you did, in the previous works with the, when you were carrying the bucket in the grass area, or? Yeah.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, great question. I know I love the unexpected that comes in. I mean, some people would be really really upset about that, but and in that case, if I had had the GoPro, I think it would have been just like it had been in the previous ones, with one camera in the water and one down on the floor, maybe. And that probably wouldn't have worked as well. It would have been too similar. Whereas with my phone, I just had to make, I built this little mount for the ceiling, and I just, and for those, I think it just worked. It really worked much better than having the other views that I had before. And I think it, as a, metaphor for life, the unexpected and the spontaneity of nature, as the quote, mentioned, really comes into play. You just kind of have to embrace those, because I could have I wouldn't have spent the money, but I could have just bought another GoPro, or, while I was there, but I just dealt with what I had.
And I do like how it was just like a, like a sudden kind of change, because, and you're right, because it would have been, could have been like a little bit too similar to the previous one. And it's good to kind of like accidentally have these things that happen. And it just, like, the unpredictability really makes it like very like exciting for the artwork, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And even though it seems like it's like the mold, I thought they were all ruined. I was ready to just throw them away. But then, I really realized that, it's still progressing. The work is moving.
Thank you, Bethany, and thank you, Bijan, for the question. There's also a comment from Fernando Reyes. Congratulations, Bethany, to let your inner child play with nature, materials, shape, etc. Gracias for your work. Thank you for your work.
Oh, well, thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you. And yeah, it is, there's a great quote by Robert Irwin that I think he was receiving an honorary degree or something. And all he said when he walked up to the podium was, the wonder is still there. And it really, it is for me.
Somebody else has a comment or a question? There is a comment in the chat. Lorenzo Sanchez Ramirez, I'm not sure your name, but there's a D only. Good afternoon. I have been trying to see how to make a work that raises awareness about ridiculousness of violence produced by drugs in Mexico. I think the idea of an immersive experience that impacts the receiver, since the objective is to make a catharsis to bring out the strongest emotions, such as anger, fear, that people feel identified. I would like to know if you do you have any advice to bring out and capture these emotions in such type of work? Thank you very much.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yes. Well, what I, in my own work is I try to actually kind of strip down to the essence of a feeling. So I don't like to refer to it as conceptual work, but it kind of is. But I like to really get to the idea of the essence of that feeling. However, I certainly, there are artists, and I'm trying, as I talk, I'm going to try to remember the name of this artist that really creates these elaborate room-sized installations that just present straightforward this idea of violence and what's happening. And, that is certainly a very effective way to do it as well. It works, So I think there are multiple ways of approaching this. For me, again, like it's kind of thinking about the essence of it. So how do you really emphasize, and sometimes that's the audio, really appealing to multiple senses. So audio or video within a space can really do that. You can almost saturate the feeling to really make an impact, I think. I hope that answers the question. And I still haven't thought of the name, so if I do, I will try to remember that.
Thank you, Bethany. Thank you for your question, Lorenzo. There's another question coming from Andrea. When you have an idea, do you visualize how it's going to work in the space? Or is that something that you figure out with the process of making the piece? I really like your work.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So sometimes it's different. If I know a space the work is going to be in, that will often play into how the work transforms, just in scale. And oftentimes, because of the larger work, especially, I have to have an idea of the space it's going into. And so for the first one that I gave an example, it was in direct relation to the space it was going in. And then for the more recent work, it was the first time I actually was able to do work that I didn't really know what was going to happen with it. I didn't have a space for it, so it kind of freed up my ideas, and so it also let it flow, kind of let it divulge into what it became. So like the bread, I wasn't expecting to do that, but I had this time and facilities to do it. So I guess it formed from being able to do it in that space, but it didn't have a direct relation to the exhibition space. But thanks. I hope that.
Thank you, Bethany. There is a comment from Nuria. I love your idea of being at home outside in the nature.
Oh, great. Well, thanks. Yeah, I know. I feel very lucky to be where I am and be able to experience nature whenever I really want to.
Andrea says, thank you so much for for the answer. And then Nuria makes a question, how that this resonate with our present, living global lockdowns as a result of pandemic crisis. Does your work has changed in this recent times?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I think all artists, creative people are dealing with this idea and how this current state of being, it's an anxiety that we're kind of living at the moment influences our work. And I've really been thinking about how I might, and this is like, I also process things relatively slowly in some ways. So I'm in the idea stage of, because I just did this project being away from my daughter. Now I'm with her all the time, which is interesting. So I'm trying to figure out actually how to relate that in this ongoing work, because everything has shifted. I went, from working constantly and now being home, and it's been great being with her, but it's also very different, and the opposite of what I was dealing with when I went away. So that's going to be my next investigation, I think.
Thank you, Bethany. Thank you, Nuria, for your question. There's another question coming from Majo. She's saying that she likes really much your work, and she is questioning, or she wants to say this, the idea, I like really much the idea of getting something out of the original place and giving it another meaning. I really like the idea of getting something that it's in the original, something like I'm thinking that she's saying like in real life, how do you make it philosophical? Because what I understand of what she's saying is that she is enjoying that you're taking the object or the video, the nature into another context, and then giving it a philosophical meaning.
Oh.
So she's making that comment.
Oh, great, thanks. It's interesting because I remember specifically too speaking with a philosopher, Aaron Manning, actually, about Heidegger, and I was looking at him at the time, and she then through our conversation, she just said, "I think you're going to find that he's just too humanist for you," and she's right. Yeah. So a lot of my thinking and what I've been thinking and reading on the philosophical side has been moving away from the humanist approach.
Thank you, Bethany. Another comment or question? Can you talk a little bit more about your collaboration process and just in your personal creative practice?
Oh, yes. So it's always been a really important part. Unfortunately, I haven't been doing as much lately. And it's just, time, but and work, but it's always there. And even as I mentioned, so I find my individual work when it's interacting with the audience is collaborative in that nature. But I find it's so important in so many different ways, whether or not you're directly making work with someone or producing something together, or just having conversations. That's part of the collaborative process. So even though I might not be doing these videos with people, I'm talking to people, I'm talking to you too, about them and where it might go. But working with people and other people and this was a lot of my PhD research, is such a benefit to the work. What everyone brings to it just makes the work stronger. And so if you're dealing with people from different backgrounds, different fields, what they're bringing in, and and I love the idea of, this interdisciplinary nature of the work coming into play. So you're not just working with artists, you're working with scientists, and for me, chefs, actors, really different people, different perspectives. And that just, I think, makes the work so much stronger. Plus you can do more with more people on the scale level.
Thank you so much, Bethany. We really appreciate your time. Also your answers, and willing also to share all these interesting processes, not just in your personal creative practice, but also in the curatorial, that I think that there's more information missing, because we cannot talk about in 45 minutes about, what have you been working for maybe 5 or 6 years. So the department, the fine arts department, and I am really grateful for you being here, but also accepting our invitation to give a talk long distance. And we hope to make future collaborations together.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, you are definitely one of my favorite collaborators too. So, I appreciate this so much. I wish we could be together in person, but
hopefully soon we will have some money to bring some artists into Puebla, and we hope that you all enjoyed the talk. And if you have any questions that you might have tomorrow, in a week, or in a month, just let me know and I will send those questions to Bethany.
yes, definitely. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, everybody, and have a good night. Thank you, Bethany, again.
Oh, thank you. Bye.